This is Earl Megget, and he is known for being one of the most talented football players in the entire state of Texas. I mean, anywhere that he plays ball, people would always recognize his greatness.
Get your country ass back in the huddle. That boy got some slave feet. You see that?
Unfortunately, most people recognize Megget for playing football in the Allenville State Penitentiary, where he helped lead his football team to a victory over the guards. But most people don't know about how Megget got there, or the trouble he got in that landed him an opportunity to play football in a Texas State federal prison. So today we are putting Earl Megget into College Football 25. Let's take a look back on his story and we'll follow him on his road to glory. You see, coming out of high school, Earl was one of the top recruits in the nation, but as much as he loved football, his main focus was getting to that money. Let's just say he had a pharmaceutical business back home in Waco, Texas. So although he had opportunities to start for some of the better schools in the country, he wanted to stay somewhere close to home where he could still potentially continue his business. But when he found out that the only school he would have an opportunity to potentially start at was actually the closest school to him, it only made sense for Earl Megget to sign with Baylor. Now, Baylor did not have Earl's favorite number 23, but he was cool with just settling for number 22. On top of that, Megget would run into some issues because his teammate was talking about how he wouldn't be able to take his starting spot. Now, Megget had never been a real confrontational guy, so he just kindly let him know that he doesn't plan on being a backup for long. And when looking at his offensive line, he felt confident about the idea about having a big season with this team. And he was looking forward to bringing that idea to life going into his first game against FCS Midwest. They got Megget out there playing wide receiver in the first quarter, and on his very first play, he actually catches this pass and brings his team all the way down to the 1-yard line, already making an impact on the game. He went back out at wide receiver where his quarterback threw an interception on the next drive, taking some potential points off the board for Baylor. But after halftime, Earl Megget was looking to put up some points himself. He was so fast that he actually ran past this guy right here and ran it into the end zone for the first touchdown of his college football career. And he had a feeling it wouldn't be the last, because now that they were putting him at running back, he was showing that he could be a dangerous weapon on the ground as well. But they let Earl go out there and run around some more before he actually got in for his second receiving touchdown of the day. I mean, Earl Megget was having an excellent college debut, and he was even going out there and taking handoffs and saying hey to defenders before picking up first downs. And after they let Earl get in for one more run, where he took this ball upfield deep into opposing territory, that would help close this game out, as the Baylor Bears would go on to win 45-0, with Earl Megget winning player of the game with 87 rushing yards off of 6 attempts and 2 touchdowns. And with his receiving totals, he actually went for over 200 yards with only 13 total touches. And that was the kind of thing that would earn him the opportunity to become the starter from here on out. And considering that Earl Megget had potential to become one of the best running backs of all time, it seemed pretty obvious that he would come ready and prepared to win this position battle and earn the number 1 spot. But now that that was over and done with, Earl couldn't wait to get into another game as Baylor was set to face off against Utah. To start this game off, Earl was already saying "excuse me" and making defenders miss. He was doing a great job proving that he was still a valuable receiving threat, but Earl knew it was time to start his dominance on the ground as he powers in for his first rushing touchdown of his college football career. But since they were playing one of the top schools in the country, he knew he had to lock back in. And so did the rest of his team as they all worked hard to get themselves right back downfield and in scoring position. Once again, Megget made a catch out of the backfield that brought his team within goal-to-goal distance. And then somehow the quarterback fit this pass in that went in for another touchdown on the day for Earl Megget. Throughout this game, Megget actually felt that his quarterback was really balling. And throughout the majority of the game, he really was. Up until the third quarter where he ended up throwing this pick that allowed Utah the opportunity to take the lead going into the fourth quarter. And Megget knew that if he could just keep getting the ball, he could single-handedly lead his team down the field and into the end zone to take the lead. He took this pass out of the backfield to move the sticks once again for his team. But on a great opportunity to put up some more points, the quarterback actually throws another pick and ends this game, as Utah would go on to win 17-14, handing Earl Megget his first loss in college football despite having another great performance. On the bright side, Earl Megget's pharmaceutical salesman partner, Big Damon, was working hard with Earl on some things that he felt like could make them both very rich. So Earl went into the next game feeling great, where he and the Baylor Bears were set to face off against the Air Force. In this game, Earl started off well by wiggling his way for a first down, but I think the quarterback was starting where he left off in the last game because he throws another pick to begin this game. And on top of that, Baylor also got called for a flag. But this was a game where Megget felt like he was playing inferior competition, and every time he touched the ball, he seemed to prove it. He even had a play where he caught the ball and said, "Skibbity, get off me," and picked up a first down, but that drive would end up in 3 points. In the second quarter, Megget was still out there putting moves on guys because he was determined to get his team downfield and potentially get him into the end zone for a touchdown. And that determination would eventually pay off as the quarterback was able to find a man open for a score to tie the game up at 10. And with Earl Megget being an absolute workhorse for this Baylor Bears offense, he was eventually able to bring him down towards the goal line where he would punch it into the end zone for a touchdown, his first one of the game to take the lead. And after Air Force failed to put up points, Earl Megget decided to take off,
Run, Forrest, run!
outrunning the entire Air Force defense and bringing Baylor in for a touchdown to take the lead. And as the fourth quarter hit, it really became all about Earl Megget, as he continued to run all over this defense, and eventually even brought them in for another touchdown to effectively end this game, as Baylor would go on to win 42-17, with Earl Megget going for 246 yards rushing off of 30 carries and 3 touchdowns. And of course, this was good enough to earn him his first Offensive Player of the Week. Now, one thing to know about Earl is that he doesn't really spend that much time studying, because he had to spend most of his time on his business and or getting faster on the field. I mean, he was already pretty fast from all the running from cops he did as a kid, but he was looking to take it to the next level, and he felt like his next game was the perfect opportunity to do so, as the Baylor Bears were set to face off against one of the top schools in the country, the Colorado Buffaloes. To start this game off, this Colorado defense was playing as soft as Charmin Ultra, because it seemed like they were allowing Baylor to have their way as they moved all the way downfield right towards the goal line, where Earl Megget would take a direct snap and rush his way into the end zone for the first points of this ball game. And even though Baylor was moving the ball pretty well, Megget would actually fumble for the first time, and luckily it was picked up by his teammate. And he got right back to helping his team make their way downfield, and Colorado's defense showed little resistance as Megget was able to punch it in for another touchdown to extend Baylor's lead to 2 possessions. Now, since they were playing Colorado, there was one guy on defense that they had to look out for, but unfortunately he ends up making an impact anyway, as Travis Hunter comes up with an interception, taking points off the board for Baylor before half. And even though Baylor's offense was only able to put up 3 points on their next possession, Colorado's offense still hasn't been able to put up a touchdown. And after this receiver breaks free and gets open for a wide open 78-yard touchdown, that would pretty much put this game away, with Colorado going on to win 24-17, with Earl Megget going for 114 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. But as great as that performance was, Megget was performing even better as a pharmaceutical salesman, and he and his partner Big Demon were really liking the direction that their business was going. You see, Earl's weekly agenda didn't really consist too much of school, because he had to spend most of his time working on that business, you know? But he also spent a lot of time getting better at football as he was getting faster on the field. And he was looking to test out some of his new speed going into his next game against BYU. It almost felt like deja vu from one game to another because Earl Megget was carving up yet another defense. He took a handoff early on in the first quarter where he was able to zoom his way downfield and eventually dive into the end zone for a touchdown, putting up the first points in this game. He was also making a lot of plays out of the backfield, as he caught a ball down the sideline before juking somebody out and trying to hurdle the next and getting slammed down to the ground. Now, throughout the second quarter, Baylor was putting their workhorse to work, as Megget was out there picking up multiple first downs, and eventually brought him down to the goal line where he dove it in for another touchdown to extend Baylor's lead to 14. But you see, Earl wasn't even done before half, because he actually took this pass and said, aha, spinning out 3 defenders and racing his way down the sideline before eventually bringing his team within goal-to-goal territory. And of course, Megget would go on to score his 3rd touchdown of the game as Baylor's lead grows to 21. And at this point, it seems like the entire team is playing at their absolute A game, because the quarterback actually throws a bomb and it ends up being caught by a receiver down at the goal line, where Megget would go in for his 4th touchdown of the game and put this one completely out of reach, because he was actually able to sit for the entire 4th quarter before Baylor would go on to win 31-0, with of course Earl Megget winning player of the game with over 100 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns, not to mention an extra 132 yards through the air with only 6 receptions, and he would earn himself another Offensive Player of the Week for his work. But there was actually some other work of Megget's being recognized, as Universal Records wanted to sign him to a record deal. You see, a lot of people don't know that Megget was out here also trying to be an artist, so this felt like the perfect opportunity for him to continue moving in that direction. But he didn't want to lose focus of what was in front of him, because he and the Baylor Bears still had a long season to play, so he had to lock back in going into a Big 12 matchup against Iowa State. In this game, Baylor actually started off horrendous, as they were unable to pick up first downs, let alone even make it past midfield throughout the entire first half. He was just happy to see that his defense was playing well enough to keep them in the game. It wasn't until the second half where Iowa State would actually give Baylor great field position and allow Baylor to start capitalizing, as Earl Megget would go on to get it into the end zone for a touchdown to tie this game up at 7. They started to get Earl more involved in the passing game, as he would catch this ball on a check down underneath, where he makes it past the 50 before juking out a defender and going down at the 41. Now ultimately that drive would end in 3 points, but it would mean a fourth quarter lead. And with Iowa State failing to put up more points, this meant that Earl Megget could help his team win the game if he could get them downfield, which he was doing a great job of doing on this play. The drive would go on to end in another 3 points, but it left Iowa State with none of their timeouts and no time to score, as Baylor would go on to win 13-7, with Earl Megget once again winning player of the game with over 100 yards rushing and 1 touchdown. Now, Earl would eventually get his grades back and find out that he actually had some D's. But that was okay though, because Earl was smart enough to know that D's get degrees. But degrees don't get you a Heisman Trophy, which it turns out that Earl Megget was in the running for. And I guess you could see why when he was the top running back in the country at this point. But since he was only in third for the voting, he knew he had to step his game up. And what better game to step up in than against an in-state rival, as the Baylor Bears were set to face off against the Texas Tech Red Raiders. To start this game off, for the first time all season, Baylor is running a speed option, and Megget actually finds an open lane and runs all the way down the sideline for what would have been a touchdown if it wasn't for Big Back McGee over here getting called for a holding. So unfortunately, this drive would actually end up in a punt. Luckily, Texas Tech would give Baylor excellent field position at the top of the second quarter and allow Megget to go in for the first touchdown of the game for Baylor and tie the game up at 7. Now, one thing that Megget hated doing was blocking for his quarterback, just for him to go on to throw a stupid-ass interception that would actually wind up going into the end zone for a pick 6. You know, there were points in this game where it seemed like the only saving grace for Baylor was having Earl Megget on their team. And it seemed like every time he got the ball, he was able to bring his team downfield for a touchdown. In the second half, it was more of the same, except Baylor wasn't fully able to finish off drives. On top of that, Baylor's quarterback was starting to throw away drives, as he threw another interception that was about to go for another pick 6. Luckily, it only went for 3. And with under 2 minutes left, Baylor has to drive right back downfield, but the quarterback throws another pick. But right when Earl thought that this game was over, it actually goes into overtime, meaning that he has an opportunity to help lead his team to a victory, but it's not looking good so far. Luckily, Baylor's defense would also hold Texas Tech to a field goal, but they would eventually go on to score a touchdown on their next possession. But Earl Megget actually takes care of that pretty easily, as he gets in for another touchdown on his day, and then also gets in for a 2-point conversion to take the lead by 2. But since Texas Tech also has an opportunity at the 2-point conversion, they go in to tie the game up, and Baylor just has to keep scoring, but the quarterback throws another interception, putting Baylor in a position to possibly lose this game, but somehow they stay alive. And now only needing just one 2-point conversion to win this game, Earl Megget finally gets it, as he was able to finally put this game away. Baylor would win 30-28 on the back of Earl Megget's 80 yards and 3 touchdowns, along with his 14 receptions and 137 yards receiving. But you see, after the game, Megget was chilling with his friends, and he was really in the mood to go out and party.
I ain't finna keep turning you cats up like this in this game, man. There's got to be something popping tonight.
Mom, what's popping tonight?
And it turns out he would eventually get an invitation somewhere. He got invited by some girl he actually met on the street one day. You see, the thing is that Megget's partner wanted him to start doing some business at that party. Now, Megget didn't really know what to do at first, but eventually he would agree because he did want to make some money. And with Earl going on to win another National Offensive Player of the Week, let's just say things were starting to get hot. As Baylor would move on to face their next opponent, Oklahoma State, Earl Megget would put on another masterclass, going in for a touchdown early on in this game. Then he would come back out after halftime and say hey to a defender before running his way all the way down the sideline and making his way towards the end zone for another touchdown on the game, absolutely cooking Oklahoma State and doing enough to actually lead Baylor to a 28-24 victory. He continued his dominance going into his next game against TCU, a team that didn't even want him to be their backup going into the season. And Earl Megget, feeling some type of way, made sure to let them hear about it. He ended up going in for another touchdown in the third quarter where he caught the ball out of the backfield and extended Baylor's lead to 2 possessions. But he still wasn't done yet, because he was able to take this carry and go on to put a defender in the dirt, before taking another carry that would go on to bring him in the end zone for another touchdown, effectively ending this game. Baylor would go on to win 35-21 and were rolling throughout this season. And everything seemed to be going perfect for Earl Megget. Until...
We have a developing story coming in from Channel 4 News, where we are finding out that Earl Megget was actually arrested this morning on drug possession charges. The Heisman candidate / rapper was apprehended this morning for also driving without insurance.
And just like that, right in the middle of his Heisman candidacy, Earl was suspended and had to sit out at least 1.5 games for conduct detrimental to the team. Unfortunately, even though Earl was trying to get out of that business with his partner, Big Demon was not having that and implored Megget to keep on working. And Megget's suspension wouldn't last too long, as his next game would eventually be against Houston, where sadly he had to sit out the entire first half. But as soon as he got in, he was immediately making an impact, making a man miss on this play before racing his way all the way down the sideline into the end zone for his first touchdown since being suspended. And it was almost like Earl never even left, because he was able to take this handoff and say, "Excuse me," before gliding his way into the end zone for his second touchdown of the game. And he felt like he was back to establishing himself as one of the best players in the country, because in the fourth quarter he was actually able to plunge his way into the end zone for his third touchdown on the game, helping to put this game away for Baylor for good, as they would go on to win 31-10, as Earl Megget would go on to have an excellent second half with over 170 yards and 4 touchdowns. The performance was even good enough to earn him National Offensive Player of the Week, and in that same week he found out that he was the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy, and I guess that was only right considering the type of season that Earl was having at this point. But the best part was that Earl was just starting to hit his top speed, and going into the final game of the regular season against Kansas, you could actually hear people in the crowd talking about how fast Megget was.
He's fast. He's really, really fast. I mean, he's so fast. He makes fast people look not fast.
Megget seemed pretty locked in this game, but so did the rest of his team, because on multiple occasions this quarterback was taking shots and was able to find men downfield to go into the end zone for touchdowns to keep control of this game. In the second half, Megget was still doing his thing, putting the moves undefended before bringing his team all the way down the field and inside the red zone, where of course Megget would ultimately punch it in for another touchdown on the day, taking the lead against the scrappy Kansas team. And although Baylor's next drive would only end up in 3 points, they would finish off a drive later in the fourth quarter where Megget would go in for a receiving touchdown to help officially put this game away against Kansas, as Baylor would go on to win 38-28, with Earl Megget leading the way with over 180 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. At this point, Earl Megget was starting to reach his potential as a football player, and he knew that there was still a lot more that he could do on the field. And he was looking forward to showing that going into the Big 12 Conference Championship game against Utah. To start this game off, Megget was already making dudes look silly, juking out a defender and stiff-arming another one before picking up a first down. And even though they would find themselves way behind the sticks at one point, Earl Megget was there to save the day, as he was able to help the team pick up a first down on 3rd and 19. And then eventually get in for a receiving touchdown, as Baylor would go on to take a 7-0 lead late in the first quarter. Megget was making himself available as a big-time receiving threat in this game, getting open once again as he helped his team move past midfield. But for the first time all season, the quarterback throws an interception when throwing to Earl Megget, and I guess everybody can just be happy that it didn't go for a pick 6. In the second half, now down by 10 points, every third down feels like it could be the end of the game. Luckily, having Earl Megget on the team meant that Baylor didn't have to worry as much, because throughout the entire opening possession of the second half, Earl Megget was making plays on third down to not only move the chains, but move this team into the end zone for a touchdown to cut the lead down to 3. Baylor actually had another opportunity with great field position to go score another touchdown, but instead the quarterback threw an interception. And that was the bad news, but the good news was that Utah didn't continue to put up any more points, which meant that the Baylor Bears had an opportunity to either tie and or win this game, as Earl Megget is actually taking his pass and making his way deep into Utah territory before crossing over the goal line for a touchdown, taking the lead with under 2 minutes left. And after Utah goes down the field and is unable to score points, Baylor would go on to close this game out 21-17, and they would earn the right to call themselves Big 12 champions. Now, Earl was a little surprised that he won National Offensive Player of the Week, But he was even more surprised to find out that he actually won Player of the Year, along with becoming the first Heisman winner for Baylor since Robert Griffin III, which is an incredible legacy to live up to. And when Earl Megget seen all these awards that he was winning, he realized right then and there that he could do so much more with football. But he had to put more of his focus into it, and less focus into his pharmaceutical business. So especially after his partner Big Demon had mentioned that they were running into some issues, it seemed like the perfect time for Megget to pull out of the business altogether. And it seemed like Big Demon was alright with that, and it was gonna be all good. So Earl went back to focusing on football, and was working hard to hone in on his skills because Baylor was set to go into their first ever college football playoff game, and they were set to face off against one of the top schools in the nation, the Ohio State University. To start this game off, it felt like many of the other games that Earl Megget had played throughout the season, as somehow, someway, Baylor's offense was able to keep the chains moving and pick up first downs. I mean, they used Megget mostly as a decoy throughout the first quarter, and it seemed to work as they were getting downfield, but eventually this drive would result in 3 points. And Baylor would go on to do the exact same thing in the second quarter because their second drive also results in 3 points. And with under 30 seconds left, another screen pass to Earl Megget gave him the opportunity to flip the field. And he took advantage of it as he took his team past midfield and into opposing territory, and then busted out a nice run where he ran through the gap and it brought his team within field goal range, allowing this to be a 9-14 ball game the next time they got possession. Unfortunately, the quarterback seemed interested in giving that possession away, as he throws an interception to Ohio State to end the drive before it even began. Now, luckily, Ohio State didn't really do anything with it and actually gave Baylor great field position. They got the ball into the red zone and then eventually into goal-to-goal territory before Earl Megget would punch it into the end zone for a touchdown, not only the first touchdown of the game for Baylor, but the first lead of the game for Baylor. He would also go on to get the 2-point conversion to extend it to 3 points. And after Baylor's defense comes out there and works extremely hard to get a stop, it would all eventually be ruined by a 15-yard penalty that allowed Ohio State to go back down the field and score a touchdown to take the lead with over a minute left. So now going into what could be the final possession of the season, the entire Baylor offense needs to lock in. But already on first down, there's some shenanigans going on in the backfield that resulted in a 5-yard loss. Luckily, they were able to pick up 10 yards on second down, and almost another 10 yards right here as they were able to pick up a first down to move the chains. With Earl Megget pretty easily helping to move the chains for this offense, he thought that with under a minute left, they were about to go down the field and score a touchdown to take the lead. But then Earl woke up from his dream and realized that his quarterback had thrown another interception, but this time to end the season, because Ohio State would go on to just take a knee, and Baylor would go on to lose 17-21. Although Earl Megget had another incredible game, going for over 100 yards on the ground and 100 yards through the air. Now, after the season, since Megget wasn't going to do his pharmaceutical business anymore, he decided to hit the transfer portal and had an opportunity to go to any school in the country and be a starter, because his season stats were something that people hadn't seen in a very long time. I mean, he had 1,700 yards rushing with 23 rushing touchdowns to go along with 1,100 receiving yards and 10 receiving touchdowns. I mean, he was easily the greatest running back that the Baylor Bears had ever seen. But unfortunately, Earl Megget's plans would be derailed, because it would turn out that Earl's partner Big Demon would actually snitch on him, telling the authorities that Megget was behind the entire operation, and this was the thing that not only got Earl Megget out of college football, but resulted in him being put in the Allenville Federal Penitentiary, where he was recruited by a man named Paul Crew, who wanted Megget to come play football for a team that he was putting together. And actually, at first, Megget's friends were not a fan of the idea.
Man, give me that cheeseburger. You acting like a real McAsshole.
Cheeseburger. If he wants to run with the white boys, we will let him.
This was the story of Earl Megget. And if you want to see Earl Megget play football for the Mean Machine, subscribe to the channel down below, and let's say we get this video to 1,000 likes, and we can definitely make that happen. And also be sure to comment down below who else you guys want to see next. If you got to the point in this video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I hope all of your college football and NFL teams win this weekend, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.